Okay, guys and girls, I'm on page 3 in your packet. I know many of you do not have the packet in front of you. That's fine. It's not a big deal. Just make sure that you're following along on the video, or if you do have your packet printed out and you want to go to page 3 and follow along with me, this might be something that will help you for your assignment in a few minutes. The first thing you have to do when you're asked to measure an angle is to make an estimate. In other words, you need to estimate whether you think that angle is less than 90 degrees, exactly 90 degrees, between 90 and 180, or if it's exactly 180. That's going to help you to decide which numbers you need on your protractor. So if you notice on your protractor, you've got, most of you will have a little dot that shows you where the intersection of the vertical lines would be. That's going to be where your vertex is going to be located. So when you put your protractor on the angle, it's very important that that crosshairs, you guys that are my hunters out there, you know what crosshairs are. The crosshair needs to go exactly on the vertex point. Well, if you notice, this line on your protractor has to measure up exactly on top of one of your rays. It doesn't matter. You could come in from this direction and have the bottom line overlap, or you could come in from this direction. That's why there's two sets of numbers, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. But if you make sure that the crosshairs are on your vertex point and the 0 degree line on your protractor overlaps one of the rays, you're ready to start measuring. Now, if you notice, this second ray would intersect through the protractor if it continued either between the sections 30 and 40 or between the sections 140 and 150. So you've got two options here. And this is where it gets sort of challenging for some students because you don't know which numbers to choose from. Well, that goes back to the first example at the top. You need to make sure you've already classified this as an angle. And if I'm seeing this correctly, this looks like an acute angle. So this would be the numbers between 30 and 40 because that would be the measure that's less than 180. So notice the direction you're counting. If this is 30, we are counting this direction towards 40. So 30, 31, 32, 33. Again, if you're within 2 or 3, you're close. So this angle would measure 33 degrees. Now, this angle, right off the bat, I see that it's past 90 degrees, so I've already in my mind classified this angle as an obtuse angle. So I know I'm going to need a number that's bigger than 90 but less than 180. So again, it doesn't matter which direction you come from, as long as you make sure that your crosshairs are on your vertex point and your 0 degree line is overlapping one of your two rays. It doesn't matter which direction you come from. As long as you have your protractor set up, you're fine. Now, the second ray on this angle, if you notice, is going to cut the protractor between 50 and 60 or between 120 and 130. And we've already established that this is an obtuse angle, so I need the second set of numbers here. I need the larger numbers. And so again, make sure you're paying attention which direction you're counting. You're going from 120 this direction towards 130. So I need to count clockwise. 121, 22, 23, 24, 125. So this measure would be 125 degrees. Some of you are wondering why there's two sets of measurements. Let's say, for example, you were measuring from this direction, and that was your second ray. Well, if you notice, that would be an acute angle, so what you would need is the smaller set of numbers because you're coming in from the opposite direction. And so that's why there's two sets of numbers. Classify your angle, then make sure that you are between the appropriate set of numbers. Now this one, you cannot assume that it's a 90-degree angle just by looking at it. You have to measure. And I think most of you can see, if you were to make a prediction, in my mind, I think this angle is probably going to be somewhere between 80 and 90 degrees. It's not quite 90, but it's a little less. So in my head, I've already made an estimation that this is going to be close to an 80 to 90 degree angle. Once again, make sure that your protractor is set up correctly. And if you notice, 90 only has one number. That's because it's 90 this direction and it's also 90 this direction. So we are inside 90, so you have two choices. You either have the 90 to 100, which would be an obtuse measure, or you have the 80 to 90, which would be the acute measure. This is the one I want. But again, you're going from 80 counterclockwise going towards 90. And so most of you can see that there's 81, 82, 83, 84. So anywhere 84, 85, I think you're close, as long as you get close. Now, to measure a triangle, as long as you have your vertex, because technically that's all this is three angles that have joined and formed a three-dimensional polygon called a triangle. So let's start at angle B. Again, make sure your crosshairs lined up. Your 0 degrees is overlapping one of the rays, and this is an acute measure, so I need the 60 to 70 degree mark. And it looks like to me this is 62 degrees where that exits the protractor. Now, I know some of you are now going to be turning your head trying to turn it 180 degrees, and if you remember the movie from the 70s called The Exorcist, your head doesn't move like that. So let's do a little common sense. Instead of moving your head 180 degrees, why don't we just move the paper 180 degrees? Now, A looks like to me, again, is an acute measure. So I need this degree mark, these parameters, so between 50 and 60. So there's 55, the longer section there is the halfway mark. So 55, 56, let's call this 56 degrees. And then finally, again, turning our paper, and it doesn't matter which direction as long as you have your crosshairs on the vertex point and you're at your 0 degree mark. If you notice, this is also an acute measure. So what I need to do is stay between the 60 and 70. So there's 61, 62, 63, almost 64 degrees if I'm seeing that correctly. Well, let's see here. That didn't look right. Let's see here. Actually, I get 62 as well. And one of the things we're going to talk about in a few days, if you notice, if you add all three of these numbers together, you're going to get a sum of 180 degrees. Every single triangle, if you add the three angles of that triangle together, every triangle, whether it's a tall, skinny triangle, a short, fat triangle, doesn't matter. If it's three-sided and closed, all three angles are going to add up to 180 degrees. And since these two have the same measure, this is a special kind of triangle called an isosceles acute triangle. Again, that's coming up later, but these three angles will always, in a triangle, add up to 180